Well, if you're here, you have some sort of interest in social media, in particular, possibly Twitter. I call myself a dabbler. I kind of like dabbling in different types of social media, trying to get a feel of what's out there, what works for me, what works for my class. I teach predominantly in our graduate program, so students earning their master's in teaching or master's in education, and our program has really moved a lot online. So we have full credentials and masters that are online. So a part of my job is also keeping up with what's going on in that terrain. But it's funny because every fall, I get a group of freshmen. So I get bookend. I get students that are finishing their program in a graduate program, and then I get the young freshmen right out of high school here on campus. So I have extremes of students. And that group, the freshmen that come in every fall, they're very near and dear to my heart. I don't know how long it's been since you've been a freshman in college, but it's a range of emotions and new experiences. And so as I looked at trying to help our freshman students feel a little bit more connected to the campus and to each other, this thought of utilizing social media came to mind. So before I dive into that, let me give you a quick roadmap of where we're going in the time that we have together. I'm going to take a quick pulse on your aptitude in social media, and then I'm going to share a little bit about why I decided to research social media with my freshman students, some of the theoretical framework behind that, and then the methodology behind what I used and how I used social media, and then some of my pilot study findings from this past fall. Okay, so quick social media quiz. Question, and you can quickly do this in groups. Can you name the top 5 most popular social networking sites and rank them, top 5. And you could do that quickly, and then I'll hear from you. So, all right. So let's dive in. And this was refreshed May 15th, so just a couple weeks ago, and it's constantly updated through the Alexa Global Trafficking Rank. So number 5. Anybody want to take a guess? That actually didn't make it onto the top 5, but that's actually a very good guess. It's in the top 5, but number 5 is actually MySpace. You probably thought MySpace died, but it is still present. For those of you that are familiar or not familiar with MySpace, it kind of took a refresh over the past few years as it saw a lot of its users moving away and going to Facebook or whatnot. But it's basically a space for more social entertainment. A part of the company is owned by Justin Timberlake, big musician, producer, and whatnot. So it's a strong social networking service with a musical emphasis. Okay. Number 4. Pinterest. Thank you, ladies, because this website is actually proven to be most popular among women. Not that men cannot use it, and my husband is still trying to figure out how to use Pinterest. But Pinterest is basically your social media platform for pinning things. If you just think about it, it's a big bulletin board. You pin things you like you would in your office bulletin board. The most popular categories are food and drink, the do-it-yourselves, crafts, some travel, women's apparel, decor. But it's really cool. It allows you to just kind of put in your interests, connect with people online to see if others are interested in pinning what you're interested in. All right, number 3. Surprisingly, no, but I believe that is climbing up in the ranks. LinkedIn. Spot on, LinkedIn. How many of you are on LinkedIn? Good, now we can all find each other and get more LinkedIn, right? Okay, so LinkedIn, basically social networking site for people in professional occupations. It's a chance for you to post your resume, look for jobs, connect with others, have them endorse you to say how great you are at your job and how fabulous your skills are. And this was founded in 2002 and launched in 2003. Again, mainly used for professional networking. All right, so you're not gonna post videos of what your cat did with a ball of yarn. A little different. And actually, starting in 2011, it became a publicly traded company. So those of you that have stock in it, good for you. All right, number 2. Twitter, and that's what we'll be talking about today. Again, social networking site. It's been used for various reasons and forums, I guess, depending on who you are. And it's basically a micro-blogging service, okay? How many of you have a Twitter account? How many of you have more than one Twitter account? Oh, more than half of you. All right, so basically you get to tweet messages up to 140 characters, and Twitter actually celebrated its 7th birthday this year, which is exciting. Right now they have over 500 million registered users, although about 40% of those are active users on a regular basis, okay? And number 1, Facebook. All right, online social networking service created by Mark Zuckerberg when he was at Harvard with some of his colleagues, and basically a get-to-know-you site. People have used it for various reasons and for various purposes. How many of you have a Facebook account? All right, good to see. Okay, so since all of you do use this form of social media, the question now, go ahead and turn to somebody that you know. Feel free to get out of your seats. How did you determine what social network you wanted to use, first of all? And then if you haven't gone onto a social networking site, what has prevented you? Because I actually do have friends and relatives that have not gone on social networking sites for various reasons. So how did you determine what social networking site you wanted to use? All right, let's get back together. For those of you that use some form of social media, how did you determine what social network to use? For those of you that have not, what has prevented you? And there is no judging, no open judging. You might be judging quietly, but we will not judge openly. Any volunteers? There's so many to choose from.
Security and privacy settings was huge for me when going into working with these stuff.
Okay, so you investigated different networks?
And, I mean, I've disabled my Facebook account more times than I can remember, and then gone back to it because of different privacy settings. And like, oh, until you do this, I'm going to stop using your service. Or until you do this, I'm going to stop using your service and stuff like that.
Okay, so privacy settings, which is difficult because they're always changing it.
They are very.
If you use the social network, how did you determine which one to use?
Needs, professional, personal, just needs and what I needed and wanted to do and which one fit best.
Which is probably a very common reason. What works for me, right? What works for my class, what works for my student, what works for my church, what works for my business. Which somewhat answers the next question. And different people use social media for different reasons. What fuels your purpose for using social media? Is it a marketing aspect? Is it a connection aspect?
Sure, Mike, yeah.
Well, there are some that are still trying to wrap their mind around Twitter. What exactly is Twitter? How do you use it? And I got onto Twitter maybe about 4 years ago. And like Michael Hyatt had said last night, initially I thought, oh, this is really narcissistic. Why would people want to follow me and hear what I have to say? And throughout the years, I've been wrapping my mind around how it can be useful, whether it's for marketing purposes or responding to authors or chiming in to conversations, or even feeling like you have something valuable to share. So there's an aspect of knowing what's out there, and then an aspect of being willing to be known a little bit in this virtual space, right? So currently, the average number of followers, if you don't have a Twitter account, or if you do have a Twitter account, is 27. So you might feel great about yourself because you might have 30. But the average number of followers is actually 27. I was feeling pretty good about myself after that. And it's been used for a variety of reasons, a different host of reasons, like some of you have shared. And I'm going to show a couple reasons that have really been highlighted in our culture and our society today. This is the first one. This happened when there was the earthquake in Haiti in 2010, and Ann Curry used her Twitter account, and she's the host of the Today Show, or she was a host, to help convince the US Air Force to allow Doctors Without Borders to land and provide aid for those in Haiti. So using Twitter for some sort of social good to allow aid into a country that needed it. Does this picture look familiar to anybody? Okay, so this was what was dubbed as the Twitter revolution, okay, and this was the uprising in Iran in 2009, and they called this the Arab Spring. And one thing that Twitter has been known for is the use for protests, especially in this particular region in the country. The protests in 2009, 2010 in the Iranian election, and then 2011 in the Egyptian revolution. And this eventually became known as the Green Movement. So just the use of Twitter for political reasons, some social uprising. It's hard to walk away and say that there has been no social media impact in the world when you see something like this happening. Another highlight from the news with use of Twitter, there was an IT professional in Pakistan who tipped off the world that the US Navy SEAL was raiding Pakistan to kill Osama Bin Laden, May 1st in 2011. So using Twitter to get out news, sometimes even before news sources can get out news. And we saw that recently with what happened in Boston as well. And this one is actually the most retweeted tweet ever. So this was when Barack Obama was reelected in 2012, defeating Mitt Romney in the elections. Now, when I think about Twitter use in the political arena, there's been some positive ways, like tweeting this, and then there's been some ways that have been catastrophic for those in political office that have resulted in their removal from office. So there's always a shadow side to something that could be very positive. We're going to move into why I thought about using Twitter for my class. Now, looking at everything that has been out there in Twitter and how it's been used in our culture, I thought, it serves some social good. Now, how can I bring this into a smaller scale? And what could I possibly use Twitter for in the area of academics and educational setting? And can it even have any educational good? So I started off thinking about my personal experiences in life, and this came to mind. For those of you that know me, I'm often fueled by coffee. That's my liquid gold. And over 10 years ago, when I was teaching in the K-12 classrooms, one summer I thought, I'm going to apply for a fun job. I don't know if any of you have had a fun job. It's one of those jobs where you don't have to take work home and the environment's kind of fun. So that summer I decided I'm going to apply to work as a barista in Starbucks. And back then, Starbucks wasn't on every single corner. There weren't 3 Starbucks in one block. So as I jumped into applying for Starbucks and then eventually getting hired that summer, any former baristas here or current baristas at Starbucks? Excellent. Okay, so when you become a barista and they hand you this beautiful green apron, you have over 30 hours of training. And that is more training than maybe some of the jobs I've had in the past. But you get trained not only in crafting these amazing handcrafted espresso beverages or knowing how many pumps of syrup to put in someone's venti vanilla latte, but the crux of our training really focused on what Howard Schultz initiated as this third space. So I don't know if any of you have heard or read his Pour Your Heart Into It book, but he talks about the importance of having this third space outside of work and home. It's a place for people to feel connected, and it's a place to have community form. And so as he was envisioning what Starbucks would look like, he wanted to create that type of space. So I was thinking, okay, this has been a great job, and they really indoctrinate you, and how do you create this space? How do you have conversation with people so they feel like there's this third space where they feel community? So that was brewing in the back of my mind as I was thinking about my freshmen and the class that I wanted and the use of social media. But the second thought that came up was, other than creating this type of space, was my Swatch twin phone. And I'm probably dating myself a little bit. Did anybody have a Swatch twin phone or know somebody that had a Swatch twin phone? You probably didn't even know Swatch made phones. So the Swiss watchmaker decided to make a phone. And if I could I coveted this phone for a very, very long time. Before my parents decided to gift me with it one Christmas. But the beauty of this Swatch phone was, and if you can see the picture, 2 people could be on this device at the same time. So you would pick up the receiver on one end, and then you would pick up the bottom of the phone, and somebody else can talk. So you were having conversations with 3 people, and then at the time, the phone companies started including this party line where you can click over and have all your friends talk, and that could either work for you or against you sometimes. But when I think about a smartphone, I would say this is the first smartphone that was ever out there, because it allowed more than 2 people to be in the conversation. And if your friend had a Swatch phone, then you can have 4 people talking at the same time. So I thought, okay, how do we increase conversation with our students, creating this social virtual space for community and connection to happen? So as I combed through all the different types of social media that was out there, I landed on Twitter. First of all, 140 characters. I thought, I think my freshmen can handle 140 characters at a time. Secondly, Twitter was a microblogging, a place for students or people to microblog, and it served as a platform for this ongoing public dialogue, as some of you might experience with Twitter. And that was Foundry Research. And the top 3 types of tweets that are out there are tweets about your personal life, tweets about your work life, and then sharing news. And that was published in a study in 2010. 3 more reasons I thought, okay, I can probably use Twitter with my freshmen is 1, the use of hashtags. So some of you that use Twitter know hashtags allows you to really group conversations, right? Follow a thread of conversations. There's the @sign, so if you want to directly message somebody, you can use the @sign. And then retweeting something that you thought was very interesting. So I thought, okay, I think these are things that my freshmen can really handle. Seems simple enough. But the next reason why I thought this would be really important for our freshmen coming to college is I know that the majority of college students, first-year college students, already use some sort of social networking site. They're digital natives, right? So they're familiar with using social media. And then the Pew Internet reports that US Twitter users are most popular among minorities, the young, and urban dwellers. And I thought, okay, I think this could work with our students. When I think about the freshmen that come in, I actually poll them. And I've taught this freshman class for 7 years already. Okay, so I do the same poll every fall when they come in. And if you think about when you went to college, what was that experience like when you stepped onto campus for the first time in a foreign land with a bunch of strangers? It's easy to identify the freshmen. They're usually the ones that have that glazed look on their face, and they're really nervous. They're usually really well dressed. They're the ones that foolishly take the 8 a.m. classes because they don't know that they have other options yet. But when I think about my freshman year experience, I went from a high school that was relatively large, it was about 2,400 up in the San Gabriel Valley, and then I went down to UCSD, which was over 30,000. I didn't know a single soul when I went there. And I stepped onto campus full of fear and trepidation. I had no idea how to connect with people unless you joined a club or an event on campus. So I was thinking, okay, this is a very interesting and possibly a very vulnerable population that comes in. Research has shown that 1 in 3 students do not return after their sophomore year. And that was both eye-opening and sobering and actually very depressing for me when I was thinking about it. And oftentimes, the low retention rate could be attributed to finances, family problems. A big part was actually loneliness and academic struggles that they had. And I actually see those 2 as being very interconnected, loneliness and academic struggles. Here's a quick infographic of what a first semester can be like for a student. So they come in September, ready to learn, excited. Food consumption is high because they've just realized that the CAF has French fries every day and ice cream every day. They're still getting a good amount of sleep. Stress isn't too high, and information, they're kind of taking it and soaking it all in. By October, you'll see that the amount of sleep is beginning to decrease and their stress is increasing. Their GPA begins to dwindle a little bit. They're trying to navigate this new place and this new space, this new rhythm of life. So as you see over the course of 4 months as they come in, they're really experiencing just a range of emotions, okay? And it's really affecting different areas of their life. And by December, their posture is, I am going to die. How am I going to make it through finals week, okay? So tapping a little bit further into why freshmen, this is one of my freshman classes this past fall. This is the end of the semester, so I think they're looking pretty decent for the end of the semester. But if your school is something like Biola, we do a fantastic job bringing them in. They have amazing orientation week, move-in, really trying to help them transition well. But what happens after those first 2 weeks of school? They're used to being around this group of 20, doing everything from bonfires to going to the Hollywood Bowl to going to chapel together. And so they go from extremes of being together in this cluster to being completely isolated, and they have to navigate this new academic system all on their own. Another reason why I chose freshmen is, I don't know if you might have this at your school, but we have what's called a FirstYear Seminar. It's an orientation to university life. And I love this class because the intention is really to help students feel connected to each other, connected to the campus, understand what campus resources are about, and then at the same time help them understand a little bit more about their major and hopefully get to meet a person or two that'll walk with them along this journey. So this was the freshman class. I had two classes, the other one's a little bit bigger. And this is where I implemented using Twitter as a part of the class assignment. Again, like I said, the biggest fear for these students, really, every time I see their survey after the first day of class, number one, not having friends. And number two, failing in school. And this is a very real fear for our students. And the thought behind this is, how do we help our students face those fears? And as Michael Hyatt said, we lean forward a little bit, try something new with them, have them try something new in hopes that they can feel a little bit more connected. Biola really focuses on this smaller community, interpersonal relationships, and I thought this is really important for our students. Throughout the semester, the past few years, I would have freshman students come into my office and they would just be crying, really doubting whether or not this was the right place for them. So how do we have these conversations with our student, and what can we implement into our classes to help them navigate these feelings and help them feel a little bit more connected? All right, so the theoretical framework, for those of you that might be a little bit familiar with learning theory and student development theory, I was thinking about what would be a good educational theory to understand what's going on. I'm a researcher by trade. The classes I teach in our graduate program are research methods and statistics, so this is kind of ingrained in always having to have a theoretical framework behind every type of research I do. The first one is social learning theory, and this is from Albert Bandura in 1977. He says, we learn and then we reproduce what we learn. That helps us learn. We learn through observation, motivations, and retention. And my guess is in 1977, Bandura probably had no idea that social learning was going to expand into virtual space, that students are going to learn beyond the interpersonal, the face-to-face, but they're actually going to learn and retain and be motivated through social space. All right, so this was the first theory that I was looking at. The second one, for those of you that are familiar with student development, is Vincent Tinto's 3 stages. And he focuses on these 3 stages that students move through specifically when they're entering college. Okay, so the first stage they go through is the separation stage. They're moving away from their home environment, moving away from what is familiar to them. And some of these students actually have a very difficult and almost traumatic experience doing this. They've never moved out of maybe their town of 3,500, and all of a sudden they're at this school of over 4,000. But they will eventually move, for better or worse, into this second stage, which is transition. And the second stage that students are in, they're trying to navigate, they kind of have one foot in the old and familiar and one foot in the new. Right? Some students might start to feel a little bit disconnected with their old environment, but yet at the same time, they're not fully feeling like they belong as a member of the community in this new environment. Okay? And then lastly, the third stage that students enter is the stage of incorporation, where they feel just a complete sense of membership, both into the social and academic community. And I wanted to think about, well, I have the students coming in through the transition and separation. How do we help them successfully enter into this feeling of incorporation, that they are valued members of this community? The third theory I wanted to look at was Astons' involvement theory. And basically, Aston says the greater quantity and quality of involvement, and back in the day when he posed this theory, social media and social networking wasn't available for students, the more likely students are going to succeed in college. So this really bridges the loneliness that students feel into succeeding academically. So there is a connection between the two. So I'm going to jump into what exactly I did with these students. So I had 2 sections of first year seminar. These students were declared as elementary education students, and I had a total of 37 freshmen, 37 willing participants over a course of 12 weeks. All right, so this course ran from the very first week of school right up until almost Thanksgiving. All right, and when I asked and polled the students, 97 students had heard of Twitter, and 3% of them had never ever heard of Twitter. All right. As I moved on, of those that had actually heard of Twitter, only 27% of them used Twitter, and out of the 27%, half of them tweeted less than 1 time a week. So I wouldn't say they're power users. They weren't regular users like, say, Lady Gaga and Justin Timberlake, who are the top 2 power users in Twitter today. All right. So I thought, okay, this is a little bit new to them. Some of them have it, some of them don't. This would be a great way to experiment to see if this is actually going to work with our students. All right. So here were the parameters that I had with the students. I let them know that we're all going to log and create an account on Twitter. You're each going to set up your individual account. You can use your real name, you can use a pseudonym. It's up to you. But they were required to follow me, and I opened an account specifically for this class, and they were required to follow me. I followed all 37 of them, and they were required to follow each other, whether or not they were in the same section or not. So I wanted to instantly build kind of a group, an intentional group with these students, and they were required to tweet at least 5 times per week. I gave them general parameters. I said you can tweet about what you're learning in your Bible class or what you're learning in psychology. You can tweet about something that you had in the CAF that you thought was amazing, or a new creation you used. They get very creative after probably week 6 when they've had the same thing. They can tweet about campus events, what they're involved in, new discoveries. So I wanted to throw it, kind of put very wide parameters for them. So go ahead and tweet about anything you're learning, whether it's academic or not, anything you would like to share with your classmates. So those were the tweeting categories. We had a specific hashtag for our class. It was biola FYS, and it stood for Biola First Year Seminar. I realized nobody else had that hashtag, so I kind of wanted to capitalize on that. Some of them included Instagram pictures, which was okay. I said, if you have pictures to share, go ahead and include that in your tweet. And then as a way to let them know that I was connected with them and I was aware of what they're tweeting, I did a weekly top 10 tweets. So yes, I combed through 37 students' tweets on a weekly basis before we met for class each week. And just to let you know, we met 1 time a week for class for about an hour and a half. So that was the only face-to-face time I had with these students, which was another impetus why I thought I want to find an additional way to connect with them outside of class. Okay? So some of the weekly top 10 tweets, anything from Nation Ball, for those of you that are familiar, it's one large wild game of dodgeball in the gym. So some students tweeted about Nation Ball and their teams. Other top tweets that I would show weekly in the class, some students would share maybe a verse that was focused on in their class from Mark 10:27, just as a way to encourage their classmates. Emily here, she shared about grace, and we really encourage the students to not only attend chapel, but find a church home and community for them throughout their 4 years here. So, tweets about church, reminders or tweets that there's Spanish chapel. For those students that were taking Spanish, I think that was mandatory for them. But just a different avenue of worship, or a different way and medium of worship here on campus. So tweets ranged from any of these to even just asking questions about class that maybe they didn't ask in class or feel a little bit too intimidated to ask their professors. Anybody know if we need a Scantron for psychology? And so, these students actively responded to each other in a timely basis, and it helped them feel a little bit more connected. we weren't the psych class, we were first year seminar, but they found others that had the same classes they did. So good conversational Q&A. There's a point in the semester where students seem to all get sick. That seems to happen around October and November. So sharing ideas about what they can do with things in the CAF. Where to go if you're feeling sick, go to the health center. They have a wall of different drugs that you can take for free. Reminders about meeting for academic advising. And these last two tweets that I'm going to share, different ways that you can study for New Testament. Here's my whole stack of New Testament study cards. And then for many of the students, since they turned 18 this past year, they were able to vote. So that was a very big deal with them. I had tons of Instagram pictures in their tweets about them voting with their friends or them at the polling station. So these are just a small snippet of some of the tweets that were out there, but I can't begin to emphasize how important those top 10 tweets, because students came to class wanting to know if they made the top 10 tweet. And if I forgot to do the top 10 tweets, they would ask, well, are you going to do 20 next week then? So they really wanted to know, one, that you were engaged with them, that you were paying attention to what they were talking about and conversing about. All right, so here are my pilot study preliminary findings. And the way that I gathered data from this particular study, at the end of the semester, I gave them a survey. It was an online survey that they took through Google Forms. It was 36 questions. 30 of them were on a Likert scale from strongly agree to strongly disagree. And then 6 of them were just open-ended. I wanted just to hear back from them, garner some responses from them. All right, so let's do the numbers. You might hear this on NPR when they do stocks, but let's do the numbers. Okay, so throughout the semester, there were 2,257 total tweets from my class. And yes, that was hand counted by every single account holder. There were 75 tweets per class session on average a week. Some weeks lent to more and some weeks lent to less. There were 667 different hashtags that they used. And then 7 hashtags for our class were used on a regular basis. So there were 7 biola FirstYear Seminar hashtags that were used every week. And I wanted to know, so I looked through all of their tweets and I categorized it. For those of you that are familiar with doing data analysis, I read through all their tweets and came up with categories that emerged. So what are these students tweeting about? I wanted to break down what type of tweets were out there. The most common type of tweet really fell in my other category. And remember, I threw a very broad range of types of tweets they could put out there. And this is what we came up with. Some of the others ranged anything from just sharing information, general information, not school-related necessarily, Bible verses they used to encourage one another, traffic, and I think this was mostly from students that don't live in Southern California, where both traffic and actually the second one was weather, where they were just so surprised at how much traffic was here, and then just the weather. And then exercise, reminders of needing to exercise. We talk about the freshman 15 and how that is a common a symptom that happens to incoming students. The second and third, I guess, connected, very close to each other. The type of tweets are the green one, which is class. So they tweeted about their classes a lot. Questions about their classes, things that they're learning. We went through the book Strengths Quest, discovering their strengths. So the students tweeted about their strengths a lot. And then followed quickly by campus events. So what were they involved in? What were they corralling their peers to be involved in? Okay, whether it was, hey, don't forget to sign up for intramurals, or we need one more person for intramural volleyball, anybody interested? So these were the types of tweets that were going on. I wanted to look also, because I was thinking if I were to do this again this fall, what are their tweeting habits? Did they just do all 5 tweets right before class was going to begin on Wednesday because they knew they had to do 5? Was this spread across the week? Did they tweet daily? And what I found was the majority of the students actually tweeted between 1 time a day and 1 time every other day. So they were fairly consistent. And if you think about Twitter, you want to be very consistent. You want to have a consistent online presence. I actually broke it down and looked at the times that they tweeted. And thankfully, the majority of them tweeted sometime between 2 p.m. and 9 p.m. There were some that tweeted between 1 in the morning and 6 in the morning, but that wasn't the primary time they tweeted. But some of them did tweet during that time, which probably tells me they probably weren't sleeping. All right. This was actually a little bit surprising to me. I asked them if they tweeted through their smartphone or through their computer, because as I think later on, how will that impact what they tweet? So will they only tweet if they only have a computer at the end of the day and they have to think about, okay, what happened in my day, what can I tweet about, versus kind of having the instant, oh, you know what, I need to say this on Twitter. So most of the students, 60% of them almost, had a smartphone. But there are students that still don't have a smartphone, which is okay, that use their computers or their laptops to tweet. And you'll see this as I show some of the other results, the connection that I found in those that use smartphones and those that still tweet off their phone. And out of those students, 70% of them also had a Facebook account. So they're using both Twitter and Facebook at the same time. I asked the students how important was it for them that their professor used Twitter to communicate both class assignments or announcements or reminders. So I used Twitter for a broad range of reasons. I used it to communicate, what was due in class, who was coming to class, what our class was going to be about, and sometimes just other personal things. I believe that in using Twitter, it's a place to know your students, but it's also a place to be known. So it's kind of bridging both just the professional and just being a little bit more personal to them. And I think the students really appreciated that. The majority of the students actually say they really liked having their professor use Twitter. It was a different and additional way for them to communicate with their professor. When I asked them how connected they felt, because this was very important for me, the question was, because I followed my first year seminar professor on Twitter, I feel I know her and feel a little bit more connected to her throughout the week, more than any of my other professors. And I was really surprised. The majority of the students actually said they agree, to strongly agree that this was important for them. And not only that, but it was actually important for me. So the reason for that is because when I comb through, the tweets the students had on a daily basis, I knew what was happening to them outside of the classroom. We had an hour and a half each week together face to face. Some of them would email me, some of them would stop off in my office, but I knew what was going on in their lives on a regular basis. And this was important because it helped shape the next class that I was going to have with them. So it was remarkable because there's weeks where I noticed there's an overwhelming amount of stress that the students were facing. So that following week, I would open up with, let's talk about what it's like to be under stress. What does it do for your body? And then really channel them to, how we can give that to the Lord, how can we care for one another in the midst of stress. Other weeks, I saw a lot of students talk about quizzes they had for their psych class or another class. So there's some common threads that were occurring in their tweets. Several weeks into the semester, students were talking about loneliness and missing home a lot. So I thought, okay, this week we really need to not only go through our lesson on Strengths Quest, but really talk about what do we do when we feel really lonely? Or what do we do when we can't get along with our roommates? Because that obviously happens your first semester in school. So it really helped direct and guide some of the conversations to open up the class with the following week. What did they learn through the tweets? Did they enjoy learning about their classmates? So this is the blue line. 76% of them said, I really enjoyed learning about other students' freshman experience from my class. That was very interesting. 54% of the students said that they were more aware of activities that were going on campus because their classmates had tweeted about it. Otherwise, they wouldn't have known. So it was a good source for them to learn about each other, but it was also a good source for them to know about what was happening on campus for them, okay? I coined this the I in Twitter because there is an I in Twitter, and there's some form of I-ness in all of our tweets, right? We want to talk about ourselves, we want to talk about what we learned, so there is an I in Twitter. I asked the students whether or not they felt like they could openly share about their freshman year through Twitter, and you'll see here that it was about 40% of my students said that they felt like they can openly share. 59% of them said that they loved sharing about their freshman year. And then 54% of them said that it was a great outlet for them to either share about activities on campus or learn about activities on campus. But I do want to highlight this because there was a following question that I said, how real and transparent do you feel like you can be on social media and through Twitter? And the majority of the students said they couldn't. They didn't feel like that was either the right outlet, or they didn't feel like they could be that open and vulnerable on Twitter specifically. And I was actually very relieved to hear that. I didn't feel like this was the place for them to bear their deepest and darkest sins. I actually wanted them to have interpersonal relationships with one another, but Twitter was just a catalyst for them to get into the deeper conversations that were going to happen. It was a good outlet for them to kind of talk about more maybe superficial things, maybe talk about how lonely they're feeling or how much they miss home, but that can be taken into a deeper conversation when they have it one-on-one or with groups. The students did have prayer partners throughout the semester, so I said, that's a good place for you to share. That's a good place for you to have deeper connection with one another. As an outlet to talk about activities and just kind of general things going on, great. Deeper connection, maybe not so much, okay? So when I asked them about their sense of community, about 57, almost 60% of the students felt like it was a good place to start the sense of community with one another. Did they feel a deeper sense of community with a general college community? About 43% of the students said it was, but that wouldn't be their primary way of getting deeply connected with the college community, which was great, okay? And I really like it. Michael Hyatt had mentioned this last night, that social media is a place to start a conversation. It's not going to be a monologue, but it's a good conversational starter. And that's what I saw this study is doing. So I asked the students, generally, did you have fun doing this? Was it a bore? Was it a drain on your time and your energies? About 63% of the students said, it was fun. I got to know people. It was a good outlet for me, but it was generally a fun little experiment to do with our class. And this is what I thought was really interesting with our students. The question was, I think the college community can benefit from learning about freshmen through following them on Twitter and reading about their tweets. Over half of the students strongly agreed that they think that others on campus, both faculty, staff, administration, those in student development, really should lend an ear to what's going on and what they share on social media. Because they're here, they matter, and their experience matters. This was very thought-provoking for me, because I thought, sometimes students communicate in person, but we don't always know if they're saying really what they mean. And sometimes they say what they mean online, sometimes they don't. But at least this is an avenue for us to lend our ear to what's going on for them. It's a place for their voices to be recognized, a place for their voices to be heard, at whatever level they're willing to share that. I want to share about one student I had this past fall. She was probably the shyest student I had ever had in my teaching history. She came to me the first day of class, at the end of class, and handed me a letter and then walked out the door. And I opened that letter, and it was a letter from our Learning Center, and it said that she had dyslexia, and that she needed a little bit more time and space in class and out of class to do assignments. And I thought, oh, okay, I completely understand that. I want to honor and find ways to really encourage her. She was so quiet in class, but let me tell you, on Twitter, she was a Twitter machine. I felt like I knew every thought that was going through her mind, and I just thought, what a great way for students that might not feel comfortable sharing on paper in person what's going on in their lives. But this was a good arena for her to kind of explore and share what was going on. And eventually she opened up throughout the semester, because I would, respond to her tweets or retweet some of the things that she had shared about. But I thought it was a really neat way to kind of get to know our students that feel a little bit more intimidated by professors or just college in general. Here are some quick open-ended, it might be a little hard to read from where you are, but these were the open-ended questions I had. And I wanted to hear directly from the students through kind of their own narrative. I asked them, what was your Twitter experience like? Just general, what was it like? And it ranged from awesome to it was a great way to learn about others in my class and community. It was great to know what was going on at Biola. For those that said it was an inconvenient assignment, the majority of them tweeted through their computer, because at the end of the day, they had to get on their laptops and tweet. So it was inconvenient because they couldn't tweet when they wanted to. It was cool to get to know others, to find common interests. It was helpful when they had questions. One said, I already do enough social networking, which is probably true. But the majority of them said they really enjoyed seeing other people's tweets and seeing similarities and differences that they had in their first semester at Biola. Then I asked, well, since I had such a range of different tweets, how did you know what to tweet? Some of them said, I just tweet whatever came to my mind, whatever mood I was in, and that was very apparent in some of the tweets that I went through. A lot of them actually tweeted about being sick, and I was trying to think about why was that important for them? Why was it important for them to tweet about how miserable and how sick they were? And you know, I am going to take a step out there and say, when they come here, it can be a little isolating, it can be a little lonely. So when you're sick, you feel even worse about yourself and even more lonelier. And without their families and friends around, it's a lonely place to be. So they kind of wanted to share that, maybe in hopes that somebody would encourage them or care for them. Something that was meaningful to me, something that was memorable during the week, food at the caf. This was somehow a very common tweet. And then this really surprised me. It was something on my mind that I can't share on Facebook. I was reading some of the research recently that was coming out about Twitter, and the younger, you know, some of our students feel that because their families and their friends and their parents are on Facebook, they don't feel like they can openly share the things on Facebook that they could on Twitter because their parents aren't following them on Twitter, okay? So, gives us a lot to think about. I asked them, how did it influence your experience as a new freshman on campus? Some of them said that it really brought a sense of community through this experience with one another. It helped them see that they weren't the only ones sinking under all the stuff they had to do. So shared stress is less stress, right? When you feel like everybody is sharing that same stress. It was great constant communication throughout the week. This one made me laugh. Learn that we all do stupid things because we are freshmen. They all make similar mistakes, and that's okay. So it feels a little bit better when someone else is doing stupid things. It made me not doubt myself a lot, and I would attribute that to because we all realize we do dumb things our first semester because we're all learning. It helped me make new friends throughout this first freshman semester. I knew more about my professor in this class than I did in others. It helped me see how other freshmen were doing at a new environment so I didn't feel like an alien. And that is precisely how they feel when they walk onto this campus. It's new land, new territory. They're this new being that's being transported here. They do feel very alienated. So how do we connect them with one another? So those are some of the ways that they felt like Twitter influenced their experience as a new freshman. Some of the lessons that I learned, and if you're interested in using Twitter for your class or at your work setting, these are a couple things that I would keep in mind. And this is a constant work in progress as I learn. Number one, clarify the purpose. And when I think about social media, there's a tendency to want to throw something new, whether it's a piece of technology or social media in an environment, just to feel a little bit more relevant. I don't know if you ever feel that way, like, oh, I better use iPads in my class because that seems to be the new rage. But I would say, really think about what the purpose is. Does it make sense for your constituents? Does it make sense for your customers, for your students? I really had to sit and marinate in that thought to see if this would actually be a good place to use Twitter with my freshmen. And I did feel like it was. So clarify your purpose. Explain whether or not you want to use Twitter to share information. I know some professors use Twitter because they want their students to just kind of put out whatever they learned in class that day. For me, it was beyond that. I wanted them to feel a little bit more connected with one another while sharing information about themselves and the campus. So really clarify purpose in why you want to use this. And I think it's okay to share with your students. One other lesson that I really encourage the students in is just understanding how you present yourself online. Online presence, and I think this is something that we really need to encourage and teach our kids and our students about. What you put online, it's out there. Does it truly reflect who you are? Do you even want to be reflected that way? Do you want people to see you that way? So really understanding privacy, online presence, what's maybe more appropriate to share than not. Second, explain your parameters. How often, How many tweets? When do you want the students to tweet, if you want to be that stringent as far as parameters? But let them know, what are the parameters? Do you want them to tweet 10 to 15 times a week? Do you want them to tweet once a day? And then ensure followers. You know, relationships can't be built when you exist alone, right? So this was something that I really had to make sure my students were aware of, that they had to follow everybody else in this class, and me and others had to follow them. So you can't have community by yourself and the lone voice in virtual presence, okay? Regularly interact. So this is constant and consistent presence. And I get asked this question a lot. So does it mean you comb through all your tweets every single day? With 2,257 throughout the semester, I regularly log on to Twitter. I kind of scroll through to see if there's any anything my students have said, questions, anything that I thought would be interesting to retweet. But yes, I am consistently on. If you are aware, there are other sites where you can schedule your tweets, like on Hootsuite, so you don't have to be doing it every minute of the day. Number 5, hashtag. I found this important, and I wanted to really encourage our students, when I do this again this fall, to really use that hashtag so they can kind of group their tweets and see what's going on with their classmates. So that's really important. And then lastly, let them know you're listening. It really defeats the purpose when you have them tweet and you're not responding and you're invisible. So let them know you're listening by either favoriting their tweets, retweeting what their tweet was, if it's worth retweeting, replying to them. I had one particular student this past fall, and she was tweeting at 2 in the morning, and she just sounded very depressed. And so the following morning, I responded to her on Twitter. I said, we need to sit down and have coffee. Let's have coffee. And I found out when I sat down with her that she is the first person in her family to go to college. So even navigating how to go through college was important for her. Her mother had passed away when she was 10. Her 2 older siblings don't live with her at home. Her dad is disabled and works part-time. And so there were so many stressors going on in her life that I wouldn't have known just sitting in a class with her necessarily. But it was her willingness to just kind of throw a little bit out there, and my willingness to respond a little bit and say, hey, you know what, I noticed this. I noticed what you said. Can we sit down and have a deeper conversation? And it was just really neat just walking with her throughout this fall semester and then this past spring semester as she learned how to be a first-year college student in her family and the first to go to college. So let them know you're listening. Let them know you're there.
Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Visit biola.edu to find out how Biola could make a difference in your life.